good afternoon or morning, depending where you are. And again, as Coca said, today's session of Social Selling University is going to focus on triggers, basic 101 trigger events. I am the founder and principal at Rembor Sales Solutions. So the work that we do, as Coca mentioned, is with B2B companies around the area of new business acquisition. And our focus is primarily on execution, which you'll get a dose of today. Again, and our goal is really to help companies in two areas. One is how do they acquire new customers, or how do they go deeper and wider within existing accounts where there might be multiple budgets, multiple decision makers, and how do they do that in a timely and efficient fashion. If you think about a trigger, it's really a cause that leads to an effect. So again, it's a reaction or a response to something, and those somethings can come in various different ways. A simple one, again, every afternoon at about 3 o'clock, the school bell goes off, and that triggers almost an immediate reaction from the kids in class. We all know that when it comes to an earthquake, that could easily trigger a tsunami. The difference between the two is the immediacy or the lag between the event itself or the trigger itself and then the impact or the thing that it causes or the reaction or response that it causes. And knowing what that relationship, the timing is, will have a direct impact on your success in being able to leverage these events or leverage triggers to your advantage. And again, we'll talk about some concrete examples of that. A different example would be if you go to Inside View's page and their call to action, they're hoping to trigger a reaction from you. And when you actually click on the icon to download in the social age paper, that then triggers a response and triggers a series of events that unfold, say, using a marketing automation or other type of nurturing, where you go from a download to actually being a customer, from an inquiry to being a customer. A whole number of triggers are triggered, and a whole number of events follow that take you from point A to point B. In the book itself, specific to B2B selling, in the book itself, we talk about having buyers being in 3 buying modes or having 3 modes of buying. And the first one that I think most people or most salespeople are fairly familiar with is the status quo. The customer is set on a road, they've been on that, and they're really at this point happy with where they are, they're happy with the status quo, and they're not really searching for alternatives. At the other end, you have those people who are currently searching for alternatives, so they're actively out there using social media, some of the tools that Social Selling University has talked about and will talk about, some of the things that we'll talk about. In a sense, they are unhappy and they are actively out there looking, searching for alternatives. And in the middle, we identify an area that I think is one that is ripe with opportunity, and those are the people who have moved out of the status quo and are now into that area that we call the window of dissatisfaction. So in a simple way, this group is no longer happy with the status quo. Something has happened to no longer make them happy with the status quo, but at the same time, they're not actively out there searching for alternatives. And for that reason, it's an ideal time to approach them, and it's quite a motivated buyer because, again, they're no longer mired in that state of complacency, but at the same time, they're not out there actively looking. So some of the opportunities or advantages that come from that is if you look at timing and the perception of value that your prospect or your customers have. And in the status quo, they're quite happy. They see little difference in the value that they perceive in you or in their current supplier's value, and that's probably why they are mired in the status quo. Obviously, in the window of dissatisfaction, their perception of the value of their current provider has dropped, and if you can maintain yours, then you can begin to leverage that wider gap in perception of value between your offering and the current supplier's offering. And at the other end, it becomes really a different game because you have to basically differentiate yourself from the nearest competitor or the person or at least the group that they've chosen to deal with at the time. So again, another reason why that group in the middle, the window of dissatisfaction, offers salespeople an opportunity to engage with their prospects in a much more effective fashion. There's a much higher close ratio once you engage with somebody who is in that state of being unhappy yet not looking versus people who are at the searching for alternatives because they've already done a lot of the work. It generally often comes down to, at that point, being a price comparison as opposed to a real value exploration. If you've had an event that causes you to say, you know what, things the way they are now no longer perfect, that is one of the things that gets somebody to move from being in the status quo to being in the window of dissatisfaction. And that's one of the things that we talk to in the book, to be very cognizant of that and be able to leverage that. You know, in a simple way, I guess if you looked at it, is that their experience no longer exceeds their expectations, or something has happened to get them to look in a different direction. Simply stated, before they were happy and not looking, once they move into that window of dissatisfaction based on that event, they go into that state of being unhappy but not yet looking. And that's what I mentioned earlier, makes for a very motivated customer, because they've realized that where they are is not optimal, but they've not yet begun to take action on changing it.